Hey, welcome to TWIRx. You are not going to want to miss today's This Week in Pharmacy. It is, can you believe it? It is already December 12th. Goodness gracious. Where did 2025 go? What an amazing This Week in Pharmacy it has been. I'm on cloud nine with so much of the activity that we got to be involved with, especially the Pharmacist Fight Back Act. The experience in Washington, D.C. was absolutely phenomenal. We cannot wait to share this with you. We're going to have a special podcast covering the Pharmacist Fight Back Act on Thursday, December 18th. What an experience that was. I'm grateful to APCI for sponsoring our press coverage of that event that just took place in the Capitol yesterday. We were just blown away by the participation and the excitement and the sincerity of all of the politicians that were involved, and how important it is that we have bipartisan support for this bill. The PBM reform is happening. It's taken a long time to happen. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows how frustrating it is. And I just want to just say thank you. Thank you to everybody that stayed in the fight. Made national news. This is coming from WKYT for TWIRx News Today. This is Kentucky lawmaker introduces federal bill fight pharmacy benefit managers. This is Representative James Comey for the Pharmacist Fight Back Act, and he mirrors the state law already in place for the great state of Kentucky. We got to talk with State Representative Jake Auchincloss. We're going to have that as part of the special episode on January 18th of the PBM Reform podcast. But this was exciting to be down in Washington, D.C. A shout out to Pharmacists United for Truth and Transparency as well, and all their work in this. Hey, let's go to the next TWIRx news. This makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If you're looking on your screen, CVS Caremark settles a PBM allegation for $5 million. The Oklahoma Attorney General says that the PBM paid pharmacies less for drugs than what the medication cost, which is insanity. How does it even get to that point where you're doing it on purpose and you're putting pharmacies out of business and you're putting public health at risk? CVS Caremark will pay $5 million to Attorney General's office. The money will repay pharmacies for 68,000 plus prescriptions filled between January 2024 and August 2025, for which they were paid less than what the drug cost. And this in and of itself is very exciting to see that the CVS Caremark is getting this fine, that it's making the news, that it's making our public aware. But this is not even a scratch to them, because the pharmacies that are now out of business because of them, and the communities that don't have pharmacies because of them and these business practices, that's the issue, because now we don't have pharmacies in specific areas. Hey, on to a little bit more brighter news. Pharmacy Practice News reports seas of change preparing for payment prior authorizations. What's coming in 2026, rolling sea of economic policy, technological, and societal change, charging a clear financial strategy for health care systems is increasingly difficult, and how pharmacy budgets, major contributors to expenses, labor charges, drug biologic revenue all across the care setting, inpatient, outpatient. Take a read. This is going to be linked in the show notes. Once again, this came from Pharmacy Practice News reporting today, December 12th. Seas of Change, preparing for payment prior authorizations. Coming in from Specialty Pharmacy Continuum, thank you for your work. Shout out to you guys. December 12th, we have 340B discount, 340B discounts at risk in 2025 and beyond. This is how our 340B drug pricing programs are facing intensifying scrutiny and legal battles at both state and federal levels in 2025, and how PBMs, once again, are tightening point of sale claim identification. States are enacting anti-discrimination protection, and covered entities are waiting for the next shoe to drop. Deepening on who you're speaking with, 340B is either the greatest thing since sliced bread or Lord Voldemort himself, said Jesse Dresser, Esquire, a partner at Fire and Lovett Life Science Department, who heads the firm's pharmacy practice group. This is once again tied back to how the PBMs have abused the system put into place to help those in need under the 340B designed system. Was completely taken advantage of. And the article goes on, so please do not miss out on that article in the show notes. Specialty Pharmacy Continuum. What a week in pharmacy it has been. We hope that you have had a good week. We hope that you're maybe getting into the Christmas spirit. I don't know. Do you wait till the last minute to get into the Christmas spirit? I'm in. I'm ready to go. We will be excited to talk more about the pharmacist fight back. If you were there, we're going to be doing some follow-up interviews. A shout out to Nikki Bryant, Dr. Nikki Bryant. Got to have you on. A shout out to Dawn Butterfield down in Florida. We're going to have you on. Excited to have seen you and spend some time with you. This is This Week in Pharmacy. Here we go. Hey there, welcome to This Week in Pharmacy. I'm your host, Todd Urey, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. It's been a crazy week. Just got back from Washington, D.C. in support of the Pharmacist Fight Back Act. A shout out to Greg Reibold and the APCI team that invited us there to cover that event. There's going to be a bunch of content that's going to be coming out. We're going to be talking about what that means for the nation, what that means for our individual states, and getting updates. So we so much appreciate the updates that Greg brings us from the PBM Reform podcast and what's going to happen in 2026. I'm hopeful. There's so much happening in the usage of artificial intelligence. Later in today's show, you're going to hear a discussion with Harry Travis, who is a consultant in the specialty pharmacy space, and he's a breath of fresh air when it comes to bringing us information about how AI is going to impact operations. And Amanda Ah is going to be on, Dr. Ah, who's going to be talking about Curatio and her role as a new consultant in the specialty pharmacy space. How does AI impact specialty pharmacy specifically? I'm really looking forward to that interview. But today, I have two special guests, both returning to TWIRx, and no stranger to TWIRx. He knows how TWIRx works. It's Antonio Ciaccia.
Great to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you too. You've been so busy, I haven't been able to get you on, but excited that you're here today. Returning to TWIRx is Alec Ginsberg. He is known as the Drugstore Cowboy. I absolutely love that nickname. And you are, in fact, a cowboy out there. You're kicking up a lot of great information. That's why you're here today, because I want to talk to you about an article that you wrote, which was titled "The hidden lender in America's drug supply chain. By the way, listeners, if you haven't read this, you have to read it. And I'm going to put a link in our show notes to that article. It's on your blog, right, Alec, or is it on LinkedIn?
Yep. It's at drugstorecowboy.com. It'll be the first article that's on there.
Excellent. I want to just open up to you, Alec. Just give us, the listeners, just a cliff notes of that article and why it lit some fires and how much attention it got when you published it.
Yeah, I think the inspiration for it and the gist of it in a nutshell is that we've heard so much about the government stepping in and controlling pricing of the GLP-1s, and also with the new Inflation Reduction Act pricing that starts on January 1st. And my question as a pharmacy owner this whole time was, okay, but how are we getting paid for all of this? Because it doesn't seem like the cost is changing at all. So we're still going to be acquiring the drugs at the same price. You know, how does everything work from that point forward? And given that the pricing for the IRA drugs, those 10 drugs they've negotiated, is going to start in 3 weeks, and I still don't know how this is going to work, I was starting to get worried. So I did a little research into it, and it turns out that they're creating this entirely new way of reimbursement for pharmacies direct with the manufacturers, and they're creating this new entity that's going to be like the transaction intermediary between pharmacies and getting reimbursements from the manufacturers. And the whole thing was so confusing. But at the end of it, when I got to the bottom of it, I realized that it's just another way for pharmacies to essentially turn into non-guaranteed interest-free lenders to the government. And it's just another burden that's being added to a pharmacy plate that's already operating on razor thin margins. And I just couldn't believe it. So I had to start chatting about it a little bit.
I thought of Antonio as soon as I read it and wanted to hear from you. And when you said yes to the interview to come on TWIRx, I was ecstatic, because there's so much authenticity that you bring to these conversations around data through 3Access advisors and things that you're doing. But open us up and develop the summary for not only this article, but referencing back to what you see is the truth through data that you do in the research you do.
Yeah, so it was good to hear Alec expertly lay out in layman's terms how our system works, who funds it, and who benefits from it. One of the things that I struggle with as somebody who's been trying to teach people about how the system works is that for every transaction in pharmacy, it feels like there's like a dozen sub transactions, which obviously creates a lot of opportunity for those who are involved in those sub transactions to make money. But it also obviously benefits, those who seek to arbitrage an increasingly complex system. The more complex it is, the easier it is to make money underneath the tent. Earlier this year, we worked with the National Community Pharmacists Association, NCPA, to try to predict what the impact of the IRA would be. As Alec excellently lays out, the IRA and the Medicare the maximum fair price policy creates is essentially a splitting of the transaction to say, in the old model, whether you were paid fairly or not for a Medicare claim, you're going to buy the drug at a high cost, you're going to get reimbursed at a high price that may or may not get you to break even, but that's how it works, right? Well, now under the maximum fair price, under the Inflation Reduction Act, pharmacies should expect to receive about 40% or less of the normal payment they would receive. So let's say you're buying a drug for about $1,000, you're going to get paid about $400 up front via your normal time schedule. But now you're going to be waiting for about 60% of the overall value of that transaction to then come back to you weeks after that claim is processed. So we're talking about 10 of the most popular drugs in the Medicare program, some of the most expensive drugs in the Medicare program, and you're asking pharmacies to float 60% of the value of a high-cost medication without any sort of understanding of whether or not you'll be made whole. And essentially, again, to Alec's point, have an interest-free loan back to the government. Our numbers that we put together back in January predicted that if the average pharmacy would see about a $10,000 week hit in terms of a budget shortfall, meaning that that's how much they'll be floating the government on average just to prop up the negotiated payments on these 10 Medicare drugs.
Yeah, and not to cut you off, but just to verify that number, before we hopped on, I took a look. I only had time to run it for 3 of the drugs, but just for Eliquis, Jardiance, and Farxiga, my pharmacy spent about $1.3 million in 2025 so far to acquire those drugs. So that, rough math, but it's about $10,000 a week that we're, laying out in just those 3 drugs alone. And that's just 3 of the 7. But you think about the course of a year. So let's say $1.3 million. What this is saying is that there's pretty much a 0% chance we're going to make any money on these medications. So let's say at the absolute maximum, we break even. If I just took that 1.3 million and let it sit in the bank in cash and made 5%, I'm making $50,000, 4%. It's just, what they're asking us to do is insane. I always talk to you, Todd, when I'm on here about how my pharmacy has a pretty solid cash position because of the other businesses we're involved in. But I don't think most pharmacies across America have that luxury where they can just say, all right, we'll take an additional chunk of change and be able to let it float for a while with no return. It's going to, you had mentioned to me before we hopped on here, like, do I have a number of how many pharmacies it might run out of business? I don't, that's more of Antonio's data, but I can tell you that certainly there are plenty of pharmacies that are already teetering where a couple, an extra $100,000 here and there is what makes all the difference.
Absolutely. We're hearing this from the buying groups that we're partnered with. When we go to the pharmacy events and conferences, we're hearing directly from the slowdown of growth, where a pharmacy says, hey, we wanted to position to purchase, 2 or 3 more pharmacies in a desert position or somewhere where someone needs, a community needs access, doesn't have anymore. Rite Aid closed down all over the place. Impacted Ohio second to Pennsylvania of how many pharmacies have been closed down throughout the state. I don't know how many in Ohio. I want to say over 200 in Ohio of Rite Aids that are now closed down. But this has massive impacts to public health. And my question is, like, policymakers, media framing the new negotiated price or implementation for these types of shifts and how to get through it. But when it goes live and when this actually takes effect and when we're moving forward, what do you think let's think about the patient for a second, or the people that don't have access. Like, talk about that, Antonio. You have data to show maybe the tsunami that's coming.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to consider is that whether we like the Biden administration's policies or not, a lot of the reforms that they injected in the Medicare program were designed to A, lower the cost sharing obligations for patients, and B, lower the amount of money the government had to spend on medicines. So the way they got there is, first and foremost, they changed the IR fees. In the previous world, pharmacies were overpaid for medicines relative to their actual net prices that they were going to be paid, meaning that they were paid, let's say, $100 for something that eventually could be clawed back to around $50. And pharmacies didn't like that. They didn't like the lack of predictability. They didn't like the lack of control. And they certainly didn't like what the net payments were after the clawbacks happened. But not thinking about pharmacy, what moving DIR fees to the point of sale did help the patient, right? Because now they no longer had to overpay for their medicines at the point of sale and instead got a more reasonable cost sharing obligation. DIR fees were explicitly designed to deprive patients of the benefits of what negotiated discounts PBMs and health plans had with pharmacies. Regardless whether we like that policy or not, it ultimately made pharmacies more cash strapped. Instead of being overpaid at the point of sale, now they went from being overpaid to underpaid at the point of sale, hoping that they could get some money later in sort of an enhanced bonus payment, which most pharmacies have not been able to get. So you have this problem where pharmacies are now essentially operating with very low cash flow. Then you compound that with the other issues with lower reimbursements across the commercial and Medicaid marketplaces, although not every Medicaid program has those problems. And so now you throw onto this new maximum fair price under Medicare that's now essentially telling pharmacies for some of the most popular and expensive drugs that they dispense that they're going to have to float over half the value to the patient with no guarantee that they actually get made whole at the end of that reimbursement scheme, because the pharmacy is relying not only upon some sort of retrospective transaction coming in from the government and the manufacturer, but they have to also rely on the PBM paying them a fair rate at the front end of that payment as well, which is not guaranteed. So in aggregate, you're asking a very cash-strapped industry to prop up an entire system of the most popular medicines in the Medicare program. Whether that becomes affordable to the patient or not is usually what the government is concerned about. What they're not thinking about, and the thing they always overlook, is whether or not that pharmacy exists in the first place to give that drug to the patient.
It's nuts.
Yeah, 100%. You know, just backing up what Antonio said. I do want to make it clear that, like, and you'll laugh as I say this, like, we're already doing this. I mean, this is a new thing, but in terms of pharmacies chasing down money and payments from the PBMs, like, that's how we already operate. The thing that's making me angry here is that the government is stepping in and adding another complicated step to this and just making our lives even more difficult. It's one thing for me to swallow when I'm floating money, you know, to PBMs that I'm being forced to work with. It's another when the government has recognized that this is a problem and saying drug pricing is out of control and we want to help patients and everybody. And then they step in and just and make it even more complicated and make the problem a bit more exacerbated. And that's sort of what I'm screaming about with all of this.
Who and what sector, Antonio, do we rush to with, hey, here's about what's to happen on a domino effect of access to medications, access to pharmacy care, access to healthcare in general, of what's going to happen? Who do we go to with a plea?
Well, you know, good luck, right? I mean, my experience, you know, watching the federal government solve drug pricing issues is that they don't solve drug pricing issues. They often just make it more complicated. And if they accomplish anything of note, the first and foremost thing they take care of is themselves. The government always works to insulate their own programs from drug pricing dysfunction. And that either becomes the cost of the provider, the patient, or the employer, or some combination of all. The biggest challenge that I see is that CMS historically, look, I don't sit here and pretend like I know that everything that an administrator at CMS has to juggle with is going to be easy or straightforward. And the issues of drug affordability for patients and plans is understandably going to be at the top of their list. But the thing that I always get bothered by is that it always feels like pharmacy or impact to providers is super far down the list. And in the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, it was very obvious that they had their eye on the prize of getting the government the ability to negotiate drug prices without actually solving the problem of inflated drug prices in the first place. Instead, to create some sort of scheme where it insulated Medicare from the harms of high drug prices. And then as they figured out, okay, this is how we're going to negotiate drug prices with drug companies, and here's how we're going to essentially start making the numbers work, and here's how we're going to logistically make sure providers are paid, they never at any point really seemed to consider what the financial impact would be to those providers. So the system kind of contemplated or assumed that providers would come along for the ride without actually juggling or melding that with the reality that providers don't have much more juice to give.
And just to add to that, like, the stuff that we recognized here is not crazy high level. Like, it doesn't take the smartest pharmacist in America or smartest pharmacy owner to have looked at this situation and recognized what the problem was going to be. Any pharmacy owner would have seen this in 2 minutes. Like, if they had one pharmacist in the room, or even not in the room, but after, just were like, hey, before we put this into practice, what do you see about this? It would have been the first thing that anybody said. And, even me thinking for 5 minutes about an alternative solution, like, they could have created a new NDC for these 10 drugs and said, if you're want to fill for a Medicare patient, purchase this NDC at this lower price and then bill it, and it's only approved for Medicare claims. Like, there are so many alternate solutions to this that any pharmacist would have come up with and seen in 2 minutes, but they don't think that far ahead. They wanted the headline and they wanted to be able to tell patients they got that lower price because it looks like a political win. So they just didn't bother asking any of us. But it would have taken 5 minutes for, if they asked any pharmacist for input, to have seen this problem and anticipated exactly what Antonio was just talking about.
Antonio, from a public policy and patient access perspective, I'm thinking of the independent community pharmacies. They decide to drop or limit some stocking of that initial 10 drugs or whatever is on the list. How do you see this affecting Medicare beneficiaries?
Yeah, I mean, look, if in the current environment, many pharmacies are quote underpaid on some of the drugs that we're talking about under the Inflation Reduction Act, but data also suggests that some pharmacies are getting overpaid for some of those drugs. So upon implementation of the maximum fair price, I think it is reasonable to assume that there will be a shakeout of sorts. The MFP essentially contemplates creating a universal experience for price. The government has stepped in and said, this will be the price of the drug. And then if people in the current environment are getting underpaid or overpaid relative to that line of demarcation, then it stands to reason that once implemented, some pharmacies will be winners and some people will be losers relative to wherever they were previously. So if you're a pharmacy and you're underwater on these drugs, Todd, we've talked a lot about issues in the marketplace where PBMs steer medicines to the pharmacies that they own. Well, one of the things pharmacies don't like talking about is the fact that they also can steer too, right? Pharmacies can make decisions on which drugs to inventory and which ones not. We know that pharmacies might make decisions to not fill a particular drug when a certain payer is involved versus other payers. Whether that's right or wrong, it's the reality of incentives, and why I'm a big advocate for right-sizing compensation for any member of the drug supply chain to ensure that they're actually incentivized to do what we want them to do. But we expect that when pharmacies start essentially having to float this type of money to the government, and if they are not essentially in some sort of position to make good margin when after the ask for that no interest loan, that pharmacies will find ways to essentially start steering those medicines outside of their pharmacy, which means that they will no longer inventory those products at all, or they'll start making pragmatic decisions on when to dispense that drug versus when not to. So the challenge I see for patients is that this makes a complicated system arguably even more complicated, because the pharmacy that you rely upon to maybe get most of your medicines or all of your medicines may actually have an opposite incentive to no longer start inventorying particular medications that you might need the most.
It's like Alec, a pharmacy owner listening in right now, is like, I can't afford to carry such medications. I can't float that kind of money. Or
well, what's ironic is, the whole purpose of this, at the heart of it, aside from saving the government money, the grander goal is to save the patient's money. The big headline is like, for patients, the costs will be significantly less. But what it's actually leading downstream to is, like, let's say you're a patient who gets atorvastatin, Ozempic, and Eliquis from a pharmacy that decides they can no longer fill Eliquis for you and no longer fill Ozempic for you because of the cost. Then you're getting your generic Lipitor, your atorvastatin from this one pharmacy. Maybe you're getting your Ozempic DTC from the drug manufacturer for cash because it's cheaper that way. And then maybe you're getting your Eliquis from the PBM mail order pharmacy. Like, all of a sudden you're just creating a polypharmacy situation, which we know is a disaster, when at the heart of it, you were just trying to help the patient from the very beginning. But this is the slippery slope that we're going down.
It's frustrating. I'm going to definitely hear more about it. Antonio, want to get you back on the PBM Reform podcast and ask you, of course, more questions and updates. The website that I want everybody to take a look at is drugstorecowboy.com. Once again, that's drugstorecowboy.com. The name of the article was The Hidden Lender in America's Drug Supply Chain. If you haven't read this, definitely do so. Once again, we'll have this link posted in the show notes. Alec, it's so good and always so good to have you on, have your insights involved in demystifying what the heck's going on. And as a pharmacy owner, you bring a lot of great insights to this. So we always appreciate you on TWIRx.
Thanks, Todd. Really appreciate you having me.
Shout out to Antonio Ciaccia. He is amazing. The work with 3 Access Advisors. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for your insights. And thank you to the TWIRx listeners out there this week in pharmacy. Hey, hold on. We'll be right back. Hey, some breaking news I do want to share with our listeners. There's some crazy algorithm that is knocking out pharmacist accounts off of Instagram. This is not good, especially when these pharmacists are helping to not only entertain, but demystify pharmacists and pharmacy and speak truth about our organizations and medications. And so take a listen.
Pharmacist, happy Friday. So I am Shane Jereminsky, PharmD, an actual pharmacist who works in a pharmacy, not a drug dealer. I know you guys know that, but that's an announcement for the Facebook algorithm because I don't want to get permanently deleted. I am coming to you with some terrible news that I just found out this morning. So apparently Facebook had some AI update and the algorithm has been purging pages. And Maurice, my brother from another mother, called me this morning. Maurice from RX Comedy and the Doctor of Comedy on Instagram. His pages on Facebook, he woke up and are permanently deleted. Why? So for whatever reason, if you're running a page about medicine and comedy that's involved with drugs like we do, sometimes you put up a picture of it or you'll be talking about it. And for whatever reason, the goofy algorithm thinks you're trying to sell those things rather than just talk about them. And if you get so many violations, you can get your page permanently deleted. It doesn't usually happen, but apparently for whatever reason with this new upgrade, it's happened to a bunch of people that they just woke up and their pages no longer exist. And this happened to Maurice. He had nearly 100,000 followers and now has to start all over if he can't seem to get his page reinstated. Apparently there's a process, but it can take up to 180 days. So I feel bad for him. The first thing you could do to support Maurice is go to Instagram, where his page still exists, and follow the Doctor of Comedy on Instagram. We're going to try and have Maurice do some cameo videos on my page until he gets his back up and running. But yeah, that sucks. And it's happening to a bunch of people. I guess if you search it on TikTok, you can see people crying because they've lost one of their streams of income, or in some cases their only stream of income, or their personal business that was generating leads and stuff. So if you're a follower who happens to be a content creator, be careful. The one thing you can do is get pay for the blue check mark. I know you can do that now. Pay for it because they're not going to treat those people that are paying Facebook $14 a month or $19 a month, whatever it costs. They wouldn't go in and randomly delete those accounts because, of course, they want to keep getting paid. Also, just be very cautious of what you put on there because you might not see it as something that would trigger the algorithm to be like a content violation, but it can be. So in no way even make a joke that you're selling anything that could be a controlled substance. So I hope I didn't flag it by saying those words, but we'll see. Anyway, have a great day. Support Maurice, free Maurice, and Pharmacy On.
That's nuts. That's nuts. So it's shout out to Maurice Shaw, Dr. Shaw. You will have our support. You come on TWIRx and share a little bit about this nightmare. But we will be right back. Going to get a quick message from our sponsor. Thank you.
As frontline healthcare providers, pharmacists like you understand the importance of personalized care, especially in acute pain management. Ural Pharma is dedicated to providing high-quality, generic products tailored to meet your patient's needs. The company aims to serve a diverse range of patient populations, including athletes recovering from intense training, weekend warriors managing minor injuries, and those seeking a practical and mess-free option for acute pain management. Keep Ural in your toolbox of pain management options and join the ranks of pharmacists leading the way in personalized care. To learn more about Ural Pharma and its products, including full prescribing information, boxed warnings, and important safety information, visit uralpharma.com. That's YARAL pharma.com and connect with them on LinkedIn.
Hey, welcome back to This Week in Pharmacy. If you saw in the header of this show, and if you're listening, you probably are interested in artificial intelligence. Are you tired of that word? Are you tired of that expression? Everybody, AI, what does it mean? Got back from the SureCost event. The SureCost, we did something called the SureCast, which was a live podcast recording that was published earlier this week on Monday. It's been a long week. It's Friday. I was in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, and it was about the Pharmacists Fight Back Act. Can't even say it. And we'll have some additional TWIRx probably next week with some of those recordings, because what an exciting time to be part of our profession and the fight that we're in for our profession and ultimately for our patients. But let's put our nerd hats on and let's bring in two of my guests and someone that I've known for years. Harry Travis has been my friend and have referenced Harry for years in the specialty space. I met you through Armada Health, which is now called Asembia. Harry, it's so good to see you and talk with you. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, Scott. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Of all the names that I'm called, Scott is the most intertwined.
Scott. I'm sorry.
But no, I don't know what it is about Scott, but it definitely called Scott.
I don't know where that came from.
It's the interchange. You're not the first person to do it. You're many of the people to do it. Amanda, it's so good to have you back. I love talking to you at the NASP. You've been such a great reference for us over the years. Thanks for being on TWIRx.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda, we're starting out with you. I want you to give our listeners, in case they're not watching us on YouTube or watching us stream live on LinkedIn, if they don't know you, tell us, who is Dr. Amanda Ah?
Yeah. Wow. Yes, that sounds, try not to get too existential here. Yeah. Thank you so much again for having me, Todd. My journey into this sort of health tech intersection wasn't sort of like linear, I guess, as most of our journeys are. Fairly vanilla start. After pharmacy school, I went into retail, and immediately I realized something was different about me, because I started asking lots of questions. Why do we do things this way? How can we make it better? It was kind of met with, oh, we don't do that here. So it was kind of like, okay, well, where do they do that? And that led me to specialty pharmacy, right? Specialty pharmacy is the most innovative corner of our industry. And so when I was working in specialty, I was lucky enough to onboard all of these different technology platforms. Through that experience, working with software vendors, a handful of them were clinicians. And so I found myself wondering, well, how do I get your job? So eventually I ended up working for a software company called VPL. Maybe some of our listeners are VPL customers. Built out a pharmacy platform with them. And now I am I'm consulting with Curatio Advisors. And we are a strategy consulting firm. We're deeply embedded in specialty pharmacy, the specialty pharmacy pipeline, distribution, market access. So it's really compelling, inspiring work. Again, at the intersection of technology and all of those things that I mentioned. So that's how I got here.
Thank you for that pathway. Cheryl and John at Curatio are legends in this space and have taken punches in the face like the rest of us over the years for things that they shouted out before they become buzzwords and before they you're one of those prize fighters as well, Harry, and you know both of those people and have worked with them in the past. But the reason why Harry's here and the reason why you're kind of the star of the show today, Harry, and the wing person is Amanda, is our AI in transforming pharmacy operations. And Harry was part of a podcast that was on the AJMC that they turned into a wonderful article published in October of 2025 titled How AI is Transforming Pharmacy Operations. The reason why I enjoyed listening to this podcast and then having you as a follow-up today on TWIRx, Harry, is because you make sense of things. And the reason that I think you make sense of things is because you were thrusted and thrown into operations very early in your pharmacy career at very high levels, with operations with CVS and operations with other specialty pharmacies. And you've worked in the trenches, and then you've taken that trench insights and you've turned it into something that can become actionable. So excited to have you here today. Just wanted you to open with a little bit about that article and what you talked about and why you think it's important to understand AI in pharmacy operations.
Well, hello, Todd. Hello, Amanda. That's a lot that you've put out there, Mr. Yuri. To just go right to the podcast, that was a podcast that I did for AJMC, part of a relationship I have with AMCP, the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacy. And we did a pre-conference on AI at last year's AMCP annual meeting in Houston. And actually, they're going to do another pre-conference on AI at the AMCP annual meeting in Nashville in April 13th, 2026. Anybody in pharmacy, no matter where you are, community pharmacy, on the payer side, inside of managed care, just like any industry, AI is touching everything. And you really need to kind of figure out, okay, where are the applications? Who are the vendors? Who's providing the technology? How does it fit? And how do you kind of deal with it in the midst of running your business or running your department flat out right now? It's not like everybody's got a whole heck of a lot of time to bring on new projects and new products and new systems and things like that. So this is adding a level of stress. Hopefully, in the long run, it will relieve some stress and create some productivity. And that's kind of the fight that everyone's in right now.
It is, and there are so many processes of this. If we were to break it down to the listener who might not be watching, we're talking about being able to analyze data quickly, make sense of that, marry that back to the patient information, connect that back with the information that's being collected at the electronic health record. Talked about optimizing drug shortages and the data around that, monitoring patient adherence, inventory management, to shout back out to VPL, connecting the patient within the last mile. I mean, there's so many aspects that we've already done this. We've already worked in these spaces without anything to do with AI 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But now that we have it, it must be leveraged. I wanted to go back to you, Amanda, and just say, so let's break it up into little bits. And the first of those bits, in my opinion, is the safety aspect. How are we leveraging AI to assure that pharmacists can practice more, better, more efficiently, and keep safety at the forefront?
Yeah. So I guess through an AI lens, the honest answer is that I don't think we are scratching the surface quite yet. Just in my mind, right, through my work with AI, seeing what it can do, it doesn't, right? Innovation doesn't have to shout. That's what John said, right? It can be humble, quietly working in the background. And I think that from a safety standpoint, right, when you think about, okay, systematic approach to safety and workflows, AI can pick up on patterns, right? AI can see things that it might take us longer to see, right? Not that we're not capable of doing the work ourselves, but using AI as a force multiplier rather than a crutch. And so safety is one of those areas that just feels like is ripe or prime for some sort of project or model that is designed to, again, leverage the efficiency that an LLM can think faster than a human, but telling it exactly what to do, right? This is the workflow. This is how things should be going. What patterns are we picking up on that might indicate an issue? And the other thing to think about there is we can use AI to pick up on potential issues when it's a near miss rather than when it's an actual error, right? So
Yeah, I think that there's challenges just to get started. Harry, that's just the opening question for you is how do you see the large language models, the AI in day-to-day operations? And by the way, how do you get started in leveraging it? Where does the pharmacy operations say, let's use it here first because it's tried and true and we can move forward from there?
Let's look at it from kind of a 20,000 foot level for a second. From the point of view of a pharmacy operator, and you could be an operator of an independent pharmacy, you could be an operator of a regional chain or one of the national chains. Let's just kind of stay high level for a second. I always say, or I cite the fact that there are 7 billion prescriptions dispensed in the United States in a year. And I don't care whether it's the simplest prescription or a really complex prescription. They all kind of go through the same process. It's just whether they're going to go through the process in a nanosecond or a couple of weeks. You got to intake the prescription. You got to do benefit verification. You've got to do a workup on the patient in terms of kind of medication review. You got to figure out if the patient can afford it. You got to do a copay assessment. All of this, on and on. Figure out how you're going to in an ongoing way, keep the patient on their medication adherence. Okay. Every one of those steps requires somebody to organize some set of data against the set of questions. What's the patient's insurance? What's their copay? What are the code numbers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And there are right now literally dozens of companies out there, AI powered kind of technology companies, presenting single point solutions to practically every pharmacy in the country. And everyone's a little overwhelmed because all of these vendors are knocking on everybody's door. I have a solution for prior auth. I have a solution for intake. I have a solution for copay assistance. I have a solution for drug information. I have a solution for MTM. So I think as an industry, we are in what I call stage 1 of a 3-stage process. And stage 1 is single point validation. We've got to validate how each one of these single point solutions work and validate them to a high degree of accuracy and reliability such that we're willing to kind of offload work to these AI agents that, okay, I trust this agent to do all my benefit verification or do all my copay assistance investigation. It's going to take a while to do that, all right? But over time, we will validate a certain subset of these single point solutions. And then stage 2 is we're going to have and if you think of each of these solutions as a bot, as an agent, stage 2 is you're going to have the bots talk to the bots. The intake bot's going to hand it off to the benefit verification bot, who's going to hand it off to the MTM bot, who's going to hand it off to the adjudication bot. And so stage 2 is kind of a sequential validation. And eventually stage 3 becomes all of this is going to kind of roll into or be absorbed by or absorb itself your pharmacy management system. So your pharmacy management systems in the future is going to be really smart. And it's not
Singularity.
right. And it's not going to be a whole bunch of plugins. It's going, the intelligence is going to be in the system. We're probably a long way from that, years, but we're slowly working to that because pharmacy is a very, very data intense kind of deterministic business. Every question in pharmacy has an answer somewhere. You just have to find it. Okay. And no one's making up answers in pharmacy. No one's composing the great American novel on some particular patient. The answer is out there. It's in some file somewhere, and more these large language models are able to find it. So that's kind of my quick overview of where we are right now. Now, if you're an independent operator, it's a lot harder because you don't have the resources and you're looking to your PSAO or your GPO or somebody like help me, or your pharmacy management system. If you're a bigger player, now you're reaching out and you're saying, okay, we can do a single point, or we can bring a coder in and we can do some of our own coding. And it just really depends on the scale of the pharmacy in terms of how you're approaching this problem.
Amanda, I don't want to get all philosophical on you, but you are here as the PharmD, and I think of streamlined production, automation control, better compliance, medical adherence, drug discovery, clinical trials, all these places the PharmD is playing. I like what Harry opened up with, this first layer. That's terrific. However, shout out to our PharmDs. It's still your license. I don't care how smart or intelligent or whatever the AI system is going to get. When it comes to final review, when it comes to double checking on adherence and what the patient is taking and what they're doing and how they're doing and documentation, before that drug is released and gets to the patient, it still comes back to the human that has the NABP, license in the state, and it comes back for responsibility. Talk to us about that balance. Talk to us about using the powerful resources and being able to quickly query and quickly compare, but then it comes down to that PharmD keeping us safe.
Sure. Yeah. I think about this a lot. I lay awake at night and think about these things. No. But so, if for anyone listening who's ever precepted a student, right? It's sort of like that, trying to say like, okay, I want to trust this student, but it's my license. Maybe I'm not going to let them dispense the most complex therapies. Maybe I'm going to let them sign it and then, sign off and then put these over here and I'll sign off afterwards, right? Just kind of like think of those things that, hey, what could I trust an intern to do? Right. And that's, I think, a good North Star as far as a cohort of sorts of different processes or pieces of that workflow that might be candidates for AI. Something that I think about a lot, and it never ceases to amaze me how many parallels there are with modern, I say modern, like agile software development sort of discipline and clinical sort of treatment modalities, are that we don't have to, an old boss of mine used to say, we don't have to swallow the elephant whole, right? Just take bite-sized pieces. What can you actually handle today, right? And another good way to look at this is, and Harry, you mentioned it too, right? Turning to the PSAOs or the GPOs or even the pharmacy management system, right? As pharmacies, especially pharmacies that may not have a huge budget for these things, you may not have a capital budget for, another software vendor, but you want to use AI, you don't want to get left behind. Talk to your staff. What are the most painful points of their day? What are the most painful, you know, parts of the workflow where you know that it's a bottleneck, you know, right? And in turn, that's ripe for, you know, one day causing an error, and start there, right? In software development, we don't think of the platform and build the entire thing and release it. We go incrementally, we iterate along the way. We ask for feedback, right? And that's, you know, there's so many parallels there when you look at software and pharmacy operations. And so a lot of times I you know, when I'm working on projects and kind of giving advice, that those are kind of some of the tenets that I go back to. You know, it doesn't have to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You know, and so that's kind of how I look at AI.
Harry, what point in workflow, what point in operations, based on your experience seeing AI 2.5, 3 years ago, creeping into a data intensive part of the ecosystem of healthcare, what part is the safest right now to rely on AI where it's not as needed to have the PharmD assuring the safety? I know as well as you do, working in pharmacy technology, that there is ability and there's a list of AI go-to prompts that are much more operational and much less clinical. And where are you seeing pharmacy operators have the most success with AI right now?
Well, I think, as Amanda said, and you kind of hinted at it, the non-clinical functions are the easiest ones and the lower risk ones. But I also think that, you know, I'll kind of take this to a different level, in that the leaders in the organization need to establish a level of trust with the folks on the front line around AI, that AI is not going to take your job, but in order for us to make everybody's job better, everybody needs to be real transparent about how they use AI or how they could use AI and what their job is. So there are people, I am sure, staff on the front line who know what the pain points are. I'm always moving these numbers from this page over to that page. It's a real pain in the ass, and it's just, you know, mind-numbing work, okay? And it's developing a level of trust with those folks for them to be able to identify that, because you don't want them to think, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about that, because if they automate that, that's 2 hours a day of my job that goes away, okay? So you've got to develop the trust with folks that says, look, we're going to take away that mindless part of your job and add more upskilling, advanced skills, additional skills. You're going to be able to be a better employer, do more for our patients, you know, that kind of thing. If you become part of the team that helps implement this. So, you know, back to your question, I think the non-clinical functions are the easiest ones to go at, that there's a lot of labor tied up there, whether you're a solopreneur pharmacy, you know, just a one-shop pharmacy, or a big chain. Go after the, you know, the friction points that are in the non-low risk points right now, and ask your staff about those.
I want to bring in a sociological aspect to this and a reflection of the way that we look at AI. Give a shout out to Gen Z. Just got done doing a podcast with my 13-year-old daughter over the weekend. She has a podcast out there called Bigger, Better, Stronger. And it's just a bunch of sarcastic inside jokes among 5 teenagers. But do you know that so many times as a punchline, so many times in discussion with each other, we drove from Brownsville, Pennsylvania to downtown Pittsburgh over the weekend with 5 bubbling teenagers in the back sharing ideas. And I can't tell you how many times I heard them say, not AI. We hate AI. We can't stand AI. I can't, because they content coming out that is, of course, AI, and they feel that it is not authentic. They don't think it brings any kind of like value. I actually took my daughter's the lead in our school play in Brownsville, Matilda, and I took her picture and I said to a AI develop, I forget which one it was. It might have been Google. I said, listen, take my daughter's face and make her Matilda, blah, blah, blah. So I did it and it looked exactly like her. It looked great. I showed her and she's like, do not use that. That's AI. And I'm just like, well, when can I use AI? So the reason why I'm bringing the sociological up is the bias, and the bias from the public, the bias from people that are developing hardened processes in health system pharmacy or specialty workflow or whatever it is. Amanda, talk to us about the sociological impact of this and the trust factor, because trust in our healthcare profession is at an all-time low in a lot of ways when you read the headlines and you read the disaster of COVID and the way we handled it and vaccines and people not trusting the science. And so talk to us about the bias.
Sure. Yeah. The stigma is certainly real. In more generations, some generations more than others, but every generation does kind of have their sentiment towards it, right? There's a vibe. And I think that, it's varying degrees of unknown, right? And fear of the unknown and not understanding it. There are, every day there's increasingly more people, right, that are educating themselves on AI. And I don't want to speak for Harry, but I know that, maybe a year or two ago when I really just didn't know anything about it, it was scary. And it was kind of like, oh, AI, and you have this idea, you think about that movie, with Haley Joel Osment. I can't remember what it's called, but do you remember which one I'm talking about? Where it was like very scary at the end where the robots take over, right? And those are these dark places that you go to. And this is the part where I said, I don't want to speak for you, Harry, but I know in my experience, just the more that I learned about it, it's not scary anymore. It's like, oh, okay, I understand how it works. I understand how it can fit into my job and my industry, and I understand how it can accelerate things, but it's not as intimidating, of course. And so I think across the generations, it is very interesting. One of my favorite content creators on LinkedIn is Cruz Corral. Have you seen his stuff?
Yes.
No.
He does these different corporate scenarios by generation. And there's a couple of them on AI and they're hilarious, but, something kind of tying back to something Harry was saying earlier too, practicing at the top of our license, right? If we think about, and I know certainly in software, we, before we build something, we want to think, okay, how am I going to know that this is successful? And the answer, right? A KPI, a key performance indicator for implementing some bit of AI. It just could be very, very small. It could be bigger, right? Depending on your resources. But a KPI could be something as simple as, does this result in a clinician practicing closer to the top of their license, right? Because to me, that's success. If you have more time to spend on talking to patients, right? Being empathetic with your patients, doing, complex clinical, thinking activities that require a human thinking, right? If you have more time to do that and some AI process or, menial job or duty that we were able to automate or simplify or just take from, it takes a minute to, it takes 5 seconds, something like that, that's success, And so just, thinking back to, okay, AI is not taking our jobs, but you will become irrelevant if you don't understand AI, you can't talk about AI, you don't, know which questions to ask, you don't know how to prompt a model, right? There's lazy prompting. And so, I guess the answer, the TLDR of this is just educate yourself, so.
Well, I think it's interesting that on this podcast and This Week in Pharmacy, we're talking with 3 generations. We have Boomer, we have Millennial, and this is the video that Amanda was talking about.
Listen up. Just want to give the heads up that we will be letting go about half the team due to AI. It's more efficient and we're cutting some costs. Who would have thought? My job. Why, stupid AI? You know what? Go ahead and have my job and update those spreadsheets too. It's freaking horrible. AI is replacing us. Great. I just finished training the intern who's supposed to be replacing me. Maybe the AI agent can finally update the CRM on time. Can I make the cutoff? Yes, I made the cutoff. Maybe I do actually like AI. It's happening a lot sooner than we originally anticipated, and my job is good. But for some of the other executives, we don't need you anymore. Well, maybe I could go start that business I always wanted to start. I have no money.
I love it. I just love it. I love the perception and the creativity and making fun of us as human beings. But Harry, there's something to that, and that's bringing you back to the question of authenticity and validity and trust and bias, and kind of give us your insights and opinion on that.
Well, I'll just say, trust is probably the most important thing in any organization, regardless of technology or change. You got to establish trust up and down the organization, and AI is going to kind of challenge that more than a lot of other technology changes because it's so pervasive and it can be very, very disruptive. So it will test any organization on kind of its kind of trust quotient from top to bottom.
It is. I see it in content development, and I see people being scolded in some ways for overusage and being able to, instead of doing a doubling up on checking your work, it's just being a cut and paste. Of course, we've heard about that in higher education. We've heard about that in medical schools and reports that are being done. There's actually now AI being used to check AI-driven papers and, by professors, and calling out people that might be overusing it. And I think this has to do with anything. I remember when Medispan updated all the data that was accessible back when I was with SoftWriters selling Framework LTC, and how revolutionary it was in the info sheets that were being printed out. And it was over data. There was too much data. So we didn't know what to use, what not to use. But we got through that, and we had very intelligent pharmacy operators use it to their advantage, use it to be able to leapfrog and pump out more information for the patient. I think that's where we're at today. I think we have operators who are well versed in running a pharmacy in an operation that has nothing to do with even technology for that point, but then edging in and using their tech and their workflow. And of course, now AI is just a layering. However, let's talk about the timing of all of this. When does it run out? When Amanda, you're old enough to have been in school. You went through school. You probably didn't use any AI and any technology because it was all new in the last 3 to 5 years. So when does it start really becoming an issue where a PharmD or pharmacy student becomes less and less, what's the word, inspired to push themselves to be the best PharmD they can be, because the tools that are available to us and the AI at our disposal is watering things down?
I have been a pharmacist long enough to have seen all of those changes, but not long enough to have thrown away my rose-colored glasses yet. And I say that because, when I think about the moment, the epiphany when I realized, oh, I don't need to know everything, right? Aside from passing your boards and just making it through school, I just need to know how to look for it, where to look, right? And how to validate the source that I'm looking for, right? You don't just Google, what's the dose of this medication, right? Just sort of understanding the context of your research. And that's where I think AI, this is where the rose-colored glasses come in. The silver lining, right? I want to see AI in pharmacy schools. I want that to become a tool, right? And I said this earlier, I think it's so powerful. I want it to be an accelerator, a multiplier, and not a crutch, right? Doing, looking and finding the most accurate and the not only accurate, but the most up to date, right? Because in this industry, things are changing so fast. And so, without getting in trouble with John and Cheryl and saying too much, that's why I'm really excited about some of the projects that we're working on because, like I was saying earlier, innovation doesn't have to shout, right? Some of the most effective tools are in the hands of the people who are making quiet decisions that move markets, right? And I see AI as really being reshaping operational intelligence, right? Data is not a problem. We have so much data. We have, I would say, we've overindulged ourselves in all the data that we have to the point where, yeah, the challenge is now, okay, what decision do I make though, right? How many software platforms offer dashboards? Everybody's got dashboards for everything, but what do I do with that, right? And so that's where the intersection is of where we can really use this as a springboard and take 1,000 dashboards and turn that into one decision. That could be a pivotal decision for that business line,
Yep.
And that could shape the industry. And so it's really exciting, fulfilling.
Harry, 3 to 5 years, we have new roles that are sprouting up because of AI. The emergence of pharmacists doing more, digging down into specialty disease states. We have pharmacists who are now going to get their board of specialty and pain management. Shout out to the pain guy, Mark Garofoli, on our network. But 3 to 5 years, we have technicians who are going to step into more operational roles that dig down into prior authorization and inventory management. What do you see happening? What do you expect entirely new job categories to emerge to enhance our pharmacy operations?
Well, I think everybody needs to watch what's going on in individual states. I constantly remind everybody in pharmacy understands this, but outside of pharmacy, and you've got listeners outside of the profession, pharmacy is regulated at a state level. What a pharmacist can do is determined by the state they live in. So watch the forward-leaning states, the ones that are leaning into full practice authority: Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa. I think Indiana's in there. And, how many other states are going to move toward full practice authority so that, yes, pharmacists and pharmacy technicians will be and should be able to do a lot more in the future. But we've got to rewrite regs to get them there before we even get to the point of provider status. Provider status assumes you're going to get paid for something, but first you have to legally be able to do it. So it starts with the regulations and then it rolls to provider status. And we may be living through a great transition where AI frees up a whole heck of a lot of pharmacy resources from the kind of bureaucratic administrative drudgery to allow more kind of clinical outreach, more primary care, fill the gap of the lack of primary care access by so many Americans with all of the pharmacies that are out there. So this could be real good, but we've got to kind of make it that. It's not going to happen on its own.
Absolutely. Amanda, Harry, this has been wonderful. Appreciate you sharing with our listeners here on This Week in Pharmacy. A shout out to Harry and the rxroundtable.com. Once again, the rxroundtable.com. It's a think tank. It's a mastermind. Harry takes different subjects. He throws some of the most intelligent operators in different sectors of healthcare, not just pharmacy, and mixes them all up. I really like what you've developed through the RX Roundtable. Harry, give our listeners just a little briefing of what you're doing at the RX Roundtable.
It's an expert network of solopreneurs and independent consultants in the kind of pharmacy and benefit management space. And if you want to learn more about it, go scroll right to the top there, Todd, to RXR Briefings. That's our newsletter. So you can go to rxrbriefings.com or therxroundtable.com and sign up for one of our newsletters. And I'm usually writing about AI and pharmacy or interviewing somebody on that topic there. So thanks a lot for that shout out.
Absolutely. There will be a link in the show notes to the rxroundtable.com. Amanda, we have to schedule some time at Assembia 2026. I'm going to definitely be there with bells on. So you have to reserve me some time so Curatio can give us an update on what's happening in specialty pharmacy.
Awesome. Yes, I'll be there.
Harry, hope to see you there as well. Appreciate both of you spending time with us on This Week in Pharmacy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Feeling lost with the complexities of pharmacy accounting?
In pharmacy today, there's so many different, variables and issues that impact the pharmacy books, records, accounting, the profitability of the store, so forth. There's different components of pharmacy that have its own nuances from an accounting standpoint. And so it's tricky. There's no doubt about it.
Ready to take your pharmacy to the next level but don't know where to start? Sykes & Company is here to help. Introducing the RX Assessment. With the RX Assessment, the pharmacy CPAs and advisors at Sykes will do a deep dive into your accounting and tax situation and give you the action steps you need to take your pharmacy to the next level.
If you're interested in, working with a team who understands the industry and how the accounting and tax should really be in a pharmacy, this is your chance to get a under the hood check of what's going on and getting the feedback of any issues or concerns or, again, things we think you're doing really well with.
Get the financial checkup your pharmacy needs and head over to sykes-cpa.com or call 252-482-7644.
We're here on TWIRx This Week in Pharmacy. Got someone in the studio with me. I want to introduce Dr. Jessica Daly to TWIRx.
Thanks, Todd. This is exciting. We had our first session just a few weeks ago, and now I've already been invited into the studio. I'm very excited.
Into the inner circle of the TWIRx land.
Absolutely.
So introduce yourself to the listeners, just in case people don't know who Jessica Daly is.
Sure. So, hi, Jessica Daly, pharmacist by training, but I've spent the majority of my career in the pharmacy supply chain. So not practicing with patients, but really focusing more on getting drugs to the patients that need them. So I've worked in the healthcare arena, responsibility for a large integrated delivery network, and then also for one of the largest acute GPOs, and ran the pharmacy program for them as well.
Yeah, that was Premier.
Premier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember Premier when I was in my long-term care realm. And we worked with MHA, we worked with Premier, we worked with
Innovatics.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's making me now feel old, where I see companies merging or I see major changes happening. The reason why that you're here today is exactly that. There's a lot of changes coming up in 2026. Just for everybody, today's TWIRx is Friday, December 19th. We have, what is that? 14 days before it's 2026.
2026.
That's crazy.
It's great.